Kei aku whakatamarahi ki te rangi, aku whakataitei ki te whenua, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to Party People, funded by the Public Interest Journalism Fund. I'm Mihi Ngarangi Forbes, and guys, it's schools are holidays over and the kids are back to kura, and the pollies are back to Parliament. So joining Shane and I this week is a wahine who knows all about the rough and tumble of the parliamentary playground. In 2017, Jenny Marcroft was elected as a New Zealand First List MP. She earned a reputation as a hard-working advocate for Māori, but in the run-up to the 2022 election, she was dropped down the party list, only for New Zealand First to be dropped by the voters. Since then, Jenny has said e noho rā to New Zealand First, and we have said kia ora rā to her. Tēnā koe te tuakana.
Oh, kia ora koutou.
Awesome having you here.
What have you been up to?
Well, I've been busy. I think once you come out of Parliament, regardless of the length of term you serve, you need to recalibrate back into what is normal life. So I took a bit of time and then ended up working in health, which was a portfolio that I held responsibility for while I was in Parliament. Even though my background was media, I went into health, so I've been working inside a PHO in an equity team, which was a really good fit for me continuing to do work around being an equity champion, which is something that drives my passion.
Health became quite busy in the last 3 years.
It's become extremely, yes, very, very busy with reforms coming down the pipeline, a lot of uncertainty out there, add on top of that the pandemic. It's pretty busy.
No he koe e hoa?
I'm from Hokianga, so whakarongoru te maunga, ko Utua te awa, ko Puketawa te marae, ko Hokianga te moana, ko te ngahi, te hone, te popoto ngā hapū. So I whakapapa into Ngāpuhi. Also I have branches going out into Te Arawa and to Ngāti Wai. So I have sort of a little bit of connectivity around the Motu.
Tēnā koe o te rā, tēnā koutou meo hapu iwi hoki. Shane, tēnā koe Parliament. Parliament's been in recess and you've been doing a little bit of rugby commentary, I hear.
Bit of rugby commentary. Someone said to me just yesterday that the All Blacks are bad of the Warriors. I said, no, things aren't that tough. But it's going to be really interesting. And, it's just part of our national psyche. We feel a little bit down when the ABs lose, and they're off to Africa. They haven't won 2 games in Africa since 1996. We had a very good team. I think it's going to be not a good tour for them. I don't see them getting positive results, and sooner or later they're going to have to go to the obvious, and that's Scott Robinson. So let's see how things play out.
And that's enough rugby for this
that's
show.
Right. That's right. Kaupapa College, second 15. That gives me my credentials.
Yeah. Let's go to a kaupapa nui.
Okay.
Look, we lost an absolute champion last week. Ricky Houghton, a man who was committed to lifting whānau out of poverty. Hone Harawira said his iwi was te pane me te rawa kore, the poor and the dispossessed, and he was right. Look, he ran He Korowai Trust, which he started literally from nothing. He saved 550 Far North homes from mortgagee sales. He literally saved thousands and thousands of people from becoming homeless. And, of course, the Kaitaia hostel, which was for men. And so many hostels are only catered for women and children, and he catered for Māori men who were really underserved. Do you have a story about Ricky?
I think we've all got beautiful stories about this incredible person who's touched so many lives. And I want to speak to 2 things. Firstly, I met him when I started going to Waitangi Day, which I've been doing every year for the last decade, and he would be there and he would be lobbying for the work he was doing. So that's how I first met him. Another time that he phoned me was after a story on Utua, where I'm from, in the poverty and the housing, which you ran on the hui.
Might have been a hui story.
Yeah, it was a hui. And guess who phoned to say I want to help? It was Ricky. He got on the blower and he said, how can I come into your valley and help with the housing situation? So what an incredible
Amazing,
man. Yeah, so that was the generosity of spirit that he demonstrated, and it was so real and genuine and authentic. And I've reflected on, since his passing, what was his driver for doing that amazing work? And as a kid that had such a terrible upbringing, he was trying to heal himself through healing and helping others.
That's beautiful.
I think that really was his gift to the world.
Kia ora, Shane.
A couple of years ago, he won a Local Heroes Award, and he was a local hero. He was a disruptor of process, because, he saw that as a bureaucracy. And also, a lot of our Māori leaders have done quite well in life in terms of using their position to do well for themselves. Quite the opposite with Ricky. He died a poor man because he gave to his people, and I just hope there is someone up there that's going to take up his mantle, because it is one that we're going to need even more so as the future comes to us.
Yeah, that is the concern, eh? It might have to be an iwi of people who take on his mantle, because he carried so much on his own. E te tani whahikuro, te taitokiro, he murimuri aroha mātou ki a koe. Let's move on to some news that's just happened in the last few days. The Green Party delegates have spoken over the weekend at the party's annual general meeting, where enough of them voted for James Shaw to vacate his seat. It means that any Green Party member can now put their name forward for the role, and I think that vote comes up in around 5 weeks' time. So what do you think this is, Jenny? Is this the Young Greens pushing for change?
Well, I think some of the commentary we've heard is that James Shaw is not seen as green enough. I mean, this is a minister who has, for the first time, taken the Greens into government, and he has been pushing the kaupapa of climate change. He's done extremely well in that. Has it gone as far enough as some of the extreme part of the party want it to go? Probably not, because when you're in a coalition, you have to make concessions. Yeah. So I think they think it's he's had his fair turn, give someone else a crack, and I think that's probably they were looking at perhaps someone like Chloe Sawbrook.
Have you got any insight into the rumblings?
Yeah. Look, mainly this is the charge of a group they called the Wild Greens, that are a bit more radical, not only environmental issues but on social issues. Left, some will say they've got a bit of a Marxist taint. And the other thing is, I think it is about Chloe usurping her authority. She is a seat MP. She's the only seat MP, and she's probably the only real insurance that they've got going into the next election, and she'll want to use that in terms of having a position of strength. I don't think James will stand. And, I know him quite well. And I just...
Should he have stood down earlier then?
Yeah,
if this was the feeling of the party, should he have kept it tidy?
Well, when I met him on a few occasions just before the last election, I felt that his real heart wasn't in it, that he saw the writing on the wall. And in a way, it really is there is need for generational change, and Chloe does represent that.
And they've got rid of their male-female gender split.
Yes.
That's right. So now it can be any gender, but Māori or Pākehā, right?
Yes.
So it could be a whole machination of a whole lot of partnerships.
Yeah, and Chloe brings that young, new, vibrant group of people into the realm, and she's pushing for that 16-year-old voting age. She'll bring more force in behind her. She's got the leadership
How will that
potential.
affect the coalition?
Well, I don't think it'll affect the coalition this time around. But what we learnt from Australia is that middle-class tier group are very important, and that's who James appeals to. And the other thing is that he is probably the best fundraiser, and all those sort of practical things will go down. But yeah, I just think the writing's on the wall, and I think Chloe will be the leader come the end of the year.
Let's move on to another party, another small but significant party. So last week, a decision was made. The New Zealand First Foundation was found not guilty of fraud. Jenny, tell us what the case is about.
Well, it's about the fundraising arm of New Zealand First set up an organisation called New Zealand First Foundation, and they went out and did the fundraising. So that's a step away from the actual political party. They fundraised, and in question is about $750,000. Now that's a significant amount of money.
Over 5 years, eh?
Over 5 years. New Zealand First really was a a grassroots party. You'd have your bake sales and your knitting thons and all those sorts of things to bring in the putia. And this was the first time that they'd sort of gone out and raised big bits of money. So in question was, what was happening with the money? Was there fraud involved? Why wasn't those funds registered with the Electoral Commission? So that's charges were laid with the Serious Fraud Office, and yes, it's taken several years from 2019 until Friday.
What do you make of it all, Shane?
Well, I think that I was really surprised that the SFO did lay charges, because I thought that if there were breaches, perhaps they could have been in the Electoral Act. So, taken under that. It's a significant loss for the SFO. They don't take a lot of cases to court and lose. They normally get people to fess up or settle.
If you get into that a little bit more,
Sure.
Because there's been some discussion around whether the Electoral Act is strong enough to to make those charges, or and that's why people have been wondering if it should be the crime. There's a lot of discussion around that. Someone said, I think a commentator said that it needs reform around there.
Oh, no, and this is why I'm quite a strong believer in what Kiritapu Allen is trying to do, make it more transparent. The days of just accepting that people can write a cheque for $14,999 and split it amongst 3 family members just to get around the act is just not on. And, there is this perception that New Zealand First is largely funded by bake sales. That's not the reality in terms of modern parties. And I think that, just absolute transparency needs to happen. And I think that not only should the registration of those interests be brought forward, I think they should be absolute transparent. The minute the money goes in the bank, it should be on some form of website.
Will there be pressure now to the SFO to explain themselves?
I think they might appeal. As I said, they don't like losing, and this was a bloody nose for them. I think there's a little bit of water to go under the bridge, because not only could they appeal, but the chief protagonist that got permanent name suppression, which is interesting in itself, might in fact go after them for costs.
Will Winston Peters feel vindicated, Jenny?
Well, I think he absolutely is relieved, I think, from the result.
Have you spoken to him?
Yes, I have spoken to him. I spoke to him yesterday.
Can you share it?
Well, I'll tell you
just on the party people.
Yeah. Just between us here.
Yeah.
He certainly was feeling relieved, and because everything in terms of defending their case they threw everything at it, and it's cost them a lot of money, let alone the $3.8 million that it's cost the Crown, the taxpayer. So he always knew that they didn't break the law. But what comes next, he will reflect on the win and what's the right next steps to take. He wouldn't make any decisions during that court process of what, if they got a win, what would those next steps be, or if they lost, what those next steps. He basically focused completely on the result of the trial. He'll take some time now what to do. I think membership of the party will say, take the win, and let's start building towards 2023, which will be the focus the party wants to do. On Monday, they're meeting, and they're going to be starting, so this week they'll start that policy process of building up some policy and putting together a manifesto and building the team to look at contesting 2023.
Shane, you tweeted he's coming.
He's coming.
He's coming.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
He'll use this as a platform that this was a hit job by the media, some within the institution that is housing us at the moment in terms of RNZ, and he will have the director and the SFO clearly in his sights. And if he is back, and I'm not prepared to write him off, I think it's going to be tough. If he is back, I think the SFO will go, and it'll just be purely absorbed into the current justice system.
If he is back, will you stand?
I haven't made any decisions about that, Mihi, but what I think, I want to take up that point that Shane's made, because it's a very important point about where will he line, what will be in his line of sight. And I think if you look back from having been inside the party, inside the caucus during that time that all of those missiles and those little bombs went off from 2019, and the timing of them, those regular intervals that RNZ ran stories, right leading up to the election, there felt like there was some political play happening which was designed to take Winston down. But more so than what would be normally a story which was worthy of investigating, absolutely, there's no question about that. But it felt like the timing of the placement of those stories at those regular intervals was set to cause major political disruption. Was there a political motivation behind it?
Do you think that's any different to any other political party? I mean, when you're a political journalist, when you know the comings and goings of politics, it doesn't matter which colour.
Except this all came from the president of the party at the time. He was the leak. He was the one that was working directly with the reporters from RNZ, and Winston has to take some responsibility. I know a lot of those key players, and I said at the time, this guy's got no experience. He's got no track record. He's promised you the delivery of a lot of money in terms of fundraising, and he delivered nothing of that. And Winston he does do this, Jenny. He brings people from the outside that don't have the experience, that seem to have a reasonably decent CV but don't deliver, and he's done that in terms of this president and many MPs.
Yes, just to be clear though, we don't know who the sources are on those stories, and I wouldn't want to put names out there and things like that. And one thing I do know about those, some of those journalists who are there, they're very protective of their sources. So let's just move on from that. We do have a new party that's been touted around the weekend, and it's Brian Tamaki. He's saying he's looking at a party with 3 current or, past smaller parties. What might it look like, Jenny?
Well, I think it will look like my nana's crocheted blanket, quite frankly. He's had a go at this before, wasn't successful. He's an outlier. Yes, he has a following and they're pretty staunch. I'm really interested to see what their roading policy will look like.
Lane for the old Harleys. When you consider Parliament at the moment, many people say that actually National has a quite conservative, religious, group inside of it. Is there enough room on that spectrum for them?
I think there is enough room. We've had the Conservatives under Colin Craig get just under 5% and then went backwards at the last election. I don't see this particular party or grouping to come together because actually they don't have a lot in common. And the other thing is with Brian Tamaki, it's either his way or no way. He doesn't actually believe in democracy. He's a theocrat. He believes that, he's given from God to lead the people of Aotearoa, New Zealand. His million-man march that he's organising in a few weeks' time would be lucky to get, 6,000 or 7,000. But the thing is that we do give him a lot of space and a lot of airtime. But you have a look, every time they've gone up in terms of they've failed spectacularly. The biggest vote they've ever got is 1,000 in Waiariki at the last election. And the other thing is that many of these parties that will bring in are conspiracy theorists, and actually they tend to turn on each other. And that was certainly the case in terms of the party that raised its head at the last election went nowhere because they turned on each other.
Yeah, in time we will tell. Let's just move to Parliament was in recess, but local government had their annual hui last week. There was a strong call for national and local governments to work together and for multiple agencies to align with local bodies to create social cohesion in the respective regions. So climate change, co-governance were also themes. You were in Parliament on the Environment and the Health Select Committees. Do grassroots organisations, including councils, understand their people better than central government, do you think?
I think if you've got MPs who are working on the ground and not just sitting in their office, then yes, they do have good connectivity into the communities. There always is more room for getting better voice from the community into the beehive and into Parliament generally. I think what's going to be interesting from my perspective in the health reforms, when they're looking at laying out this new what's called a locality format for getting good primary care health and good integrated health and planned care, is how we're going to work with council and with all of the other entities and stakeholders in a particular geographical location, because that will then be a game changer for health and for better Māori health outcomes.
Yeah, they were saying, what I heard at the conference is that when you're forced in a pandemic and a crisis to work together or to go back down to grassroots, you can do it. And so I think that there was a concern that, councils and government will move away from that kind of stuff. One of the examples they used was the Border Patrol in the north, and how at the beginning no one was interested and everyone thought it was a bad idea, but actually it became the only thing that kept COVID out of Northland.
Right. And, I think there's been some really cool things happening in that space. We're going to see the development of Māori wards, but you look around Aotearoa, New Zealand, the growth of the number of Māori that are elected in their own right in general constituencies, it's well up. And as a result of that, they get into what are fundamentally co-governance arrangements. We see that in Te Tai Tokerau, quite controversial, the Canterbury environmental group in there, where the National Party is saying, this is a bad look, but actually the National Party people that sit on that local board are saying, this is what we do and this is how we do it. And many regional and provincial local authorities, it's just the way they do it every day because of the role that iwi play in their regions.
Yeah, one of the other gold star examples was the Waikato River Authority, and how it's now something like 20, nearly 30 years old or something. So the co-governance that was working in there, Pākehā Māori, ex-former national MPs and the rest of it, saying it's very successful.
Yeah, and I think it's there's multiple models of what does co-governance look like, and I think we can't say, it's just going to be this, because iwi won't necessarily want it to be just 50-50. It might be a completely different mix of how we all govern together. So I think we need to be open to a multitude of ways of
Is it
how we
us
work
or
together.
is it local bodies that need to start being open and start thinking about how to work together?
Oh, I think a bit of both. And, I just don't think we can underestimate how important iwi such as Ngāti Awa play in the Whakatane Regional Council. They're big players in the local economy, and so that sort of develops that sort of synergy. So I think it's just as much our responsibility as it is local government.
Yeah, and also I think it's also central government's responsibility to help iwi develop the people who are going to be able to be part of governance structures.
You just mentioned Whakatane, and I think Nandor Chanchos might be running for the mayor there. But let's talk about the mayoral races, because there's a whole heap of Māori now standing in some of the competition that's coming up. Do you want to talk? Oh, let's start with Moko Te Pania from the far north. How's he going?
Oh, look, Moko is on everybody's lips. So he has got the vote from all the people I've spoken to in the north. They think he's an absolute young gun. He can speak across multiple communities. He's from the Hokianga, Mitimiti, so he's he knows a lot of people in the area. All the nannies love him. And really, I think because Kelly Shelford's standing as well. And what my aunties are telling me is that Kelly should just step back and let Moko come forward.
Well, yeah.
The nanny vote is so crucial, but actually the youth vote's crucial up there, because when you consider that half the population is 20, or the majority of the population is 25, are they going to vote those? Can Moko get them out?
Well, he'll have a better shot at getting them out than someone who's not relevant anyway.
Tell me about some of the other ones that you've been watching there, Shane.
Well, of course, you've got the head for the capital city, and that's Tory Whanau and Paul Eagle, and also really interesting, that's Green versus Labour. I think Paul's probably got the edge, and then in Ruapehu, Elijah Pue and Fiona Kahukura Hadley Chase are running for the mayoralty. A fight within a fight. They're both activists within the Māori Party. They both say that Tariana Turia was the sort of their instigator in terms of their political consciousness.
Do they have a chance?
Look, there's a former mayor standing. I think he's 70 plus, and the locals are saying he's probably the front runner. The deputy mayor in the Far North Regional Council is standing. I actually think that someone needs to sit down with both of these folks and say, hey, look, both of you will cancel out each other's vote. Let's do something for the greater good.
The Wellington one, though, is a big one. Tory Whanau, she's bright spark. People are talking about her all over the show, and then you've got Paul Eagle. They're definitely not going to do a deal.
No.
Who do you think's going to go well there?
Absolutely not. I think, Paul comes with that. He was deputy mayor, so he's been in the council. He brings that background, as well as being a member of parliament. Tori was chief of staff for the Greens, so she brings a youthful vibrance to it. I'm really enjoying watching her social media campaign so far. Yeah.
And if you look at some of the other councillors, they're young Māori. It is changing. It's changed. The landscape's changing down there.
And also another interesting dynamic is Toi Iti is standing on the Māori Party, on a Māori Party ticket, and I think that's quite smart. A year or so from the election, have some of these key people stand under the Māori Party umbrella. It gives them a sort of the party a bit of prominence when there's a bit of a lull. And they had a very successful rangatahi alternative parliament session down in Wellington, so it seems a bit of rejuvenation for the Māori Party.
Do you think that we might see Toi Iti standing in a seat if he doesn't make local body?
Well, the problem is that he's from Ruatoki. Where would he stand? Wairiki,
He's Maniapoto too.
Yeah, okay.
Maniapoto too.
Well, and...
What's happening in the Auckland race there? Efesa Collins took the lead a week ago in Auckland, a week or so ago. There was a very odd interview by the challenger, one of the challengers, Leo Malloy, where he called Guy Williams a whole bunch of names and asked him when he first had a shag, Shane.
Yeah. Well, I moderated a debate of Ngā Whare Wātia Marae. Really interesting. Of course, you would expect FESOL to support co-governance. Leo Malloy supports co-governance, and he talked about his relationship that he's got with Ngāti Whātua. Look, Leo is...
Malloy's?
Yeah. No, not he's a relation, but a relationship that he has with Ngāti Whātua. And also, I don't think we should underestimate that he does have some key support amongst, community activists like Garewi Spraggan and David Latiti. So, I don't think we can write him off. Look, it's a bit of a boring campaign, and he's sucking the political oxygen out of the air, and he sees that as his advantage. I think that he's got to be careful about it because, if you want to be the mayor, you've got to be reasonably serious.
What are we looking for the week ahead, Jenny?
Well, I think back to Parliament, so it'll be interesting after three-week recess. So that's the long recess for the year. Prime Minister's been away. Grant Robertson's been out and about. Haven't heard much from the Māori Party over the last 3 weeks. They've been pretty quiet. And, of course, Chris Luxon went away and slagged the country.
At a holiday.
And has been silent for the last week. So
Rawiri Waititi's been having little online fights with David Seymour.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's always entertaining, isn't it?
Yeah, look, the kōrero will be about inflation, cost of living, and it's a very serious issue for Māori. I think over the next little while it's only going to go up. With the reality is we're probably looking at a recession, and then we'll probably see some of our unemployment numbers climb, actually. So, it's a very serious time. What the National Party has to do is that they have to see whether or not they can get a clear pathway and be seen as a legitimate opposition and have a pathway forward. And when your basic strategy is to give rich tax cuts, I don't think that cuts in terms of where middle New Zealand is at.
Do you know, I heard an interview the other day, and I can't remember which bank or a Reserve Bank person it was, but they said that the evidence is looking that it might be plateauing, the inflation. So could that be good for the country?
Well, going up is not good. So plateau would take that as a good thing. I think we've seen a little bit of talk over the last week or so from Nicola Willis, and just getting back to Shane's point about the National Party and the strength of their ability to be in opposition. There will be questions around the leadership, whether Chris Luxon will make it till Christmas, or whether Nicola Willis's team will get in behind.
I think you've got a very good point, and we saw that when Andrew Little was the boss, and everyone thought Ardern was doing a better job. Now they're saying Nicola Willis is doing a better job than Luxon. I think
bring on the wahine.
Who might be the next person?
Willis
and the Greens.
Yeah, I think Jamie Shaw probably won't stand. I think Chloe will be the leader.
Chloe.
Ka pai. Well, that's Party People for this week. E hoa maka nui, te mihi ki te Puna Whakatongarewa mōna I tautoko I tēnei kaupapa. Don't forget you can watch us on RNZ's YouTube account and Facebook pages, or download us on Apple Podcast. E mihi ana ki a kōrua.
Kia ora.
Whai wā ki te kōrero ki a tātou. Nohoro mai rā.